Mix a struggling offense with a newly refreshed coaching staff, sprinkle in a few talented transfers, and what do you get? Hopefully to a bowl game. Hi, I'm Aaron Muller, and this is episode 32 of the Cobsmacked Podcast. This is a Nebraska football podcast where we cover the Husker season and team news. This is the final part of a deep dive where we go into the different position groups that could struggle this offseason to improve and others who might actually take a step forward. We've already covered special teams and defensive position groups in the previous videos. Be sure to watch those if you haven't already. Otherwise, let's buckle up and get ready for the offense. We're going to start with the quarterbacks. Most would assume, as I speculated in previous episodes, that Casey Thompson gets the starting position. I can't imagine they drew him in with the promise for a chance to start at quarterback. It was probably almost more like a guarantee that you're going to get the starting position. He does have the most experience out of any of the quarterbacks, and he also led the Big 12 in passing touchdowns last season. However, with the addition of Chubba Purdy and Logan Smothers still not wanting to relinquish his job that he earned at the end of last season, the spring and fall could be more interesting than some people might consider. Casey Thompson probably has a guarantee there, but almost every position across the board on the team is in an open competition. Casey probably has the starting position, but you can never discount something, out of his control or something popping up during spring. He could get injured. He might not be able to grasp the playbook. He might not be everything he's cracked up to be. Maybe Chubba Purdy or Logan Smothers really emerges this spring as an elite quarterback. In that situation, you can't start a guy that's not the best fit for the team. You look at Thompson and Purdy, they have very similar upsides. They're both pocket passers with mobility. They don't have Adrian's top speed or agility, but they don't really need that, especially if they're able to get a running back behind them that is able to kind of take over those rushing responsibilities. You only need a guy that's able to be mobile when needed. He's able to move the pocket. He's able to run when he needs to if the pocket collapses. He's able to pick up those extra 5 or 6 yards on a play. You don't need that every time, though. They're going to rely heavily on their arms, and that's what they're known for. They can be accurate. Thompson is fairly accurate when he throws the ball. It seems like that's kind of why he came here, and that's what we needed. So those are those guys' strengths. While you look at Smothers, fair or not, he is labeled as a running quarterback. He does run the option well, which is what we needed from him last season with the line not being effective at blocking or creating space for a quarterback or the running back to run. You needed to kind of run those schemes out as the option. We just haven't seen enough of his arm because of that, though. So we can't pull the label of running quarterback off of him because we haven't seen what he can truly do with his arm when he needs to rely on it. And for this reason, I think that the development of the offensive line this offseason could have a very real impact on the quarterback room. I think that if the offensive line is able to sustain pockets, give the quarterback pass protection, create lanes for the running backs to run, that it's almost guaranteed to be Casey Thompson. There's no scenario where Casey Thompson doesn't start. If he is able to get the playbook down and maintain how he has been playing, there's no reason he doesn't start in that scenario. But if the offensive line struggles and they cannot keep the quarterback protected and they cannot create lanes for the rushing game, in that scenario and in that scenario alone, I think that Logan Smothers has a chance as the better runner of the three to take over and give the offense some kind of chance to win games. But as I mentioned, I would put my money on Casey Thompson starting. I just don't see Purdy probably came here knowing that he was going to sit under Thompson for a couple years, or at least 1 year, sit under him and improve his own game at this high level. And Logan Smothers, I mentioned that I can almost see him leaving. He seems like he wants to be in the competition. He wants to compete for the starting job, which he should. I mean, you don't want a guy that doesn't want to compete. Like I mentioned, we haven't seen his arm. We haven't seen what he's able to do with it. So unless he is an elite quarterback in hiding, unless he's a Tom Brady that we just don't know about with legs, Tom Brady can't run. But you never know. You can never say never when it comes to open competition. But Casey Thompson gets a spot. If that's the case, I think that the quarterback room takes a step forward. Even if it's not all on the quarterback, even if it's just the offensive line being able to give the quarterback time to throw, that already puts the quarterback in a better position than he was last year. Adrian ran for his life most of the last 3 years. So I think that if Casey Thompson has the time, he's going to be accurate. Adrian didn't have that luxury. As much as Adrian gave to the program, that's his biggest criticism, is that he turned the ball over a lot. wasn't all on him at all. He didn't have talent around him. He didn't have protection he needed. That's why he got injured quite a bit as well. So Casey Thompson's going to bring more of a consistency to the turnover side of things as well, I think. But a lot of that's going to have to do with the fact that the offensive line probably is going to improve from last season as well. So I think the quarterback room is going to take a step forward, even if it's just slightly. Casey Thompson has shown that he's able to be consistent, accurate, and able to hit guys in stride, hit them open on big passes. So now we're going to look at the wide receivers. So this is another high competition position this spring or fall. It seems like every position's kind of this way. Every position's in an open competition scenario where the best guys are going to get those starting spots. Wide receivers, there is 21 current wide receivers listed on the roster. Mickey Joseph has the room stacked full of talent, and he has the skills to develop guys. I think that's why a lot of guys did come here, because he has shown the ability to take 2 and 3 and 4-star guys and get them into the NFL. So it's not just that he's able to get guys that are already talented and kick them up a little bit. He's able to take guys that show potential and help them realize that potential as well. So it's just a matter of who takes the challenge and who folds under the pressure and under the competition. So Samori Toure went off to the combine. Now the Huskers will need another big play target downfield to take over that role. You have a couple guys on the roster that could already almost fill that role themselves. You have Omar Manning and Xavier Betts, both have the potential to have breakout years this year. Manning is quickly becoming one of my favorite players on the team. It might be the fact that he's Darth Vader, but he has an NFL frame. He is 6'4", 225 pounds. He was the top JUCO receiver out of the 2020 class. He did struggle with mental obstacles when he came in. He didn't play for a year and a half almost, but he seems to have overcome that. And in that, he's shown a lot of maturity. He's shown a lot of experience just through that alone. And he's kind of emerging himself as somebody who can get open, who can make big catches when you need them. He's a big physical guy. I think he does have his eyes on the NFL. So with Joseph kind of pushing him along and developing him, I think he's going to have a breakout year this year. There was a lot of times last season anyway when he would run the same route that Toure had run on different plays, and Adrian either didn't see him or he didn't throw it to him. But he had times where he had big wide open space to run. And so I think he would have had a bigger year last year if there was more consistency on the offensive side of things. But this year seems like it's going to set up well for him to have a good year. You look at Xavier Betts, who is 6'2" and 200 pounds, but he is a speed demon. You can't forget the 83-yard option pitch that we ran against Northwestern where he just was gone. I don't think anybody touched him, and it was all due to his speed. He was just, once he hit the gear, he was gone. And he certainly struggled with injuries and staying healthy last season, which is why we didn't see him a ton. But I also don't think that they knew how to utilize him outside of the option game, outside of the pitching game. Obviously, he had the speed, but I don't think that he had time to develop speed. You know, if you're going downfield, it's going to take a little bit to get open. I don't think that we had that time with the offensive line not being able to block, a ghost. We just weren't able to do anything. So hopefully this season, again, everything's kind of hinging on the offensive line, which we'll get to, trust me. But again, under Joseph, developing Xavier Betts, I think that he could also have a big year. Imagine Xavier Betts and Omar Manning being on the opposite sides of the fields. Those guys are both deep threats. One guy can burn you. One guy's going to just out catch you. He's not going to let you get it. That's going to pressure safeties to watch those guys more carefully. That's going to pressure the outside linebackers, the cornerbacks to pay more attention to those guys as well, which will free up the offensive line, not have so many guys in the box. It will free up the running backs to not have so many guys in the box. It opens up the offense in so many ways, which allows for other guys to have success as well. So Joseph, as I mentioned, is going to level these two guys up. Other names could shake up the depth chart as well. Guys are already here. Some guys are already here, like Oliver Martin. He'll be a senior with some starting experience. He has battled injuries, but hasn't really shown up yet since transferring here. He has all the intangibles that you would want to see from a wide receiver, especially at this level, but he just hasn't been able to make the jump. And some of it is due to injuries. He's been dealing with injuries here and there. We've seen him a little bit in the return game, but even in those scenarios, he wasn't able to really make anything of that opportunity. So I'm not sure what the holdup is, but hopefully Mickey Joseph's able to kind of address that and figure out what it is and help him overcome that, because then, as a senior, you hope that he's able to bring some of that game experience in and make some really big plays. You have guys like Sean Hardy. He's 6'3", 190 pounds. He was the offensive scout team player of the year last year. Scout team players have to put a lot of effort out. I assume to even win that award, you have to probably put forth the best effort. So if he's willing to put himself out there like that with somebody like Joseph that's going to be able to develop that, you know, you always want a guy that's coachable. That guy sounds pretty damn coachable. So hopefully he'll be able to come in, make an effort. He's got the frame for it. I don't know how his speed looks. I haven't seen a ton of him because he's on scout team, but if he can move from scout team to first team, I imagine that you'll be able to see him in the rotation a little bit. Alante Brown has also played a very limited role, but he has potential as well. So I don't know exactly why we haven't seen him a ton. I've heard injuries, I've heard off the field issues, but whatever the reason is, if he's able to address those, he's certainly going to be in the mix as well, because he does have a lot of hype and potential around what he's capable of. You see him as a return man occasionally, and you've seen him in the mix before, but just not consistently at all. You haven't seen him every game even. But he could be developed as well. A lot of these guys, almost every guy on the field could be anything if they're willing to put forth that effort. So if he's able to clean up those issues, hopefully he'll be able to be seen on the field quite a bit as well. So you have other guys like Chancellor Brewington as well. He is known as the goal line obliterator as a tight end. We love to watch the clips on YouTube and Facebook where he just absolutely destroys some guy on a goal line block or something like that. But he could shift back to his original role as wide receiver under Joseph. He is undersized for a tight end, so he's not a true tight end anyway. So I think he's more comfortable at that wide receiver spot, and hopefully he's able to develop there as well and actually catch something out there instead of just blowing people up, which is still fun to watch. So either way, I'm happy with it. You have new guys coming in as well. So you have Dakotas Crawford, who would be a true freshman from LSU. He shows potential to be able to earn some playing time. There's a lot of hype around this guy, and I haven't actually seen a ton, but he is coming out of LSU as a highly ranked recruit. I don't think he actually has a ton of stars, but there's just a ton of guys talking about him. So again, he's coming here because of Mickey Joseph. I think there was a thing that he hadn't even been to Lincoln and he committed here because of Mickey Joseph. He trusts Mickey Joseph. He has such a relationship with Mickey Joseph that he came here because he knows what he's going to be able to be transformed into. He might not get a starting job this year, but he will certainly be in that mix for playtime as well. You have another guy, though, transfer Garcia Castaneda, who has shown success at the collegiate level. He will be vying for one of these starting spots, and he could potentially earn it. He has the speed, and his routes look clean when he runs them. He looks like everything you would need from a starting wide receiver. I don't see any reason why he wouldn't be able to, especially if he's able to develop a little bit more under Joseph this offseason. Trey Palmer, he came in, as I mentioned, as the primary return man on the special teams, but he could also find playing time in the rotation as well. I'm sure that he would rather play more snaps at wide receiver than just being that return man as well. So we have a lot of guys in this wide receiver room. As I mentioned, there's 21 guys on the wide receiver roster. So you have a ton of guys that are going to step up. I would assume that Manning and Betts are going to be probably two of the starting positions, but you could have 5 wide receivers on the roster at any given time, or on the field at any given time. So that leaves a lot of open space for guys to get play time, and it's obviously going to be the best guys out there. Mickey Joseph has an eye for talent. He has an eye for guys that are willing to put forth effort. So I'm excited to see how this wide receiver room pans out. If you look at last season, so comparing this to last season, is this wide receiver group going to improve from last season? I truly believe so for a couple of different reasons. I think that Samori Toure was basically your only threat on the offensive wide receiver side of things. So you had Omar Manning that was running open a few times. You had Vokalek that was running open a few times as well, which we'll get into, but they just weren't able to get the catch. And I don't know if that was just a link up with Adrian, not trusting them enough, not looking for them. I'm not sure what the issue was there, but Toure was your only wide receiver that you could really count on for big plays. Other than that, who can you say was consistent? Levi Falk came in for a few plays here and there that were big, but he wasn't consistent as well either. So, again, this is going to tie into the offensive line being good, but if the offensive line is able to hold both the running game and the wide receiver game, receiving game is going to be hugely improved from last season. I think Omar Manning and Xavier Betts alone, those two guys are going to have better seasons than they had last season. There's a ton of talent behind them that could find viable playing time especially at slot receivers and things like that. You're going to have so many more options to throw to, especially if you have time to throw to them and you have a coach that's going to be able to teach these guys, how to actually run routes, how to get open, how to improve their game. And so I expect the wide receiver group to take a pretty substantial jump forward next season, assuming that the offensive line is able to give the quarterback time to throw the ball. Moving on to the tight ends. So Sean Beckton has kept the tight end room consistent in an offense that was otherwise volatile. I think that that's a big reason why he kept his job when every single offensive coach got fired outside of him. He'll need to continue to develop the tight ends as well. They will probably be tasked with continuing to aid the offensive line, who is still growing, but they're struggling as well. So he's going to have them be able to pick up blocks as they have been in the past, but he's also still going to have to make them a threat in the pass game, which he has been successful at doing. You look at Austin Allen and Travis Vokalek, they were able to get open on a few plays last year, and Austin Allen, especially towards the end of the year, he was able to be utilized more in the game plan. With Mark Whipple coming in, I'm sure that he's going to use those big athletic guys at tight end for something. I mean, we are losing Austin Allen. That's obviously a huge hit to the tight end room. You look at him. He had the Big Ten tight end of the year. He is the school record holder for the most single season catches and the most yards in a season at Nebraska. But I think his leadership is going to be missed more than that. He was obviously a huge athletic talent, but he was also a captain. He was also a leader. He and Adrian Martinez were both the two guys on the offense that you look up to. They were the standard for how you hold yourself as far as hitting the weight room, putting forth effort. These are the guys that you want on your team to motivate everybody else around them. That's gone now. Adrian's gone now. You're going to have to find guys on this offense to kind of push everybody else up to that standard as well. Looking at other options, you have Travis Vokalek, who obviously had playtime last season as well. He has shown the ability to play nearly as well as Allen has. He probably has a better chance of doing well next year under Mark Whipple. I think they're going to utilize the tight ends a little bit more. I think Austin Allen was underutilized. I think he was more than capable of having at least a few more touchdowns last season. They didn't utilize him enough in the red zone. I think that's something you're going to see change next season. He's great at blocking, which was what he was mostly utilized for last season, but he has significantly improved his pass catching as well since arriving in Lincoln. He was able to get open on multiple routes as well. I mentioned those slip routes, those crossing routes. Adrian just either wasn't able to find him or he wasn't able to have the time to get it to him. So the pocket would collapse. He would have to run before getting the ball out. So he was tasked with becoming a mentor as well, or he will be tasked with becoming a mentor as well to the guys under him. I think Travis Vokalek's going to get that starting position at tight end, whether that be just to block or to go out for those slip passes. I think he's going to be the guy to look to. But he is going to have these guys under him that he's going to have to mentor because Austin Allen's not there to do it. So I don't think he has a problem with that. He's mentioned it in the past that they've kind of come to him mentioning that he's going to have to take on more of a leadership role. He seems completely fine with that. Namely, the guy under him he's going to have to mentor is Thomas Fidone, who came to Nebraska as the top tight end in the country in 2021. He was the highest rated recruit since 2008. I didn't realize how much big names we had snagged him from until I looked this up again, but we snagged him from the likes of Alabama, LSU, and Iowa, which is where he's from. It's always nice to snag somebody from Iowa because they keep snagging guys from us all the time. But he did deal with that ACL tear last spring. He did end up playing in the Wisconsin game, I believe, and he looks fine. I've seen clips of him going through practices and drills and things like that. He looks, it doesn't look like he's ever had an injury. So he's 6'6", 235 pounds. He seems to have fully recovered, as I mentioned, and he's getting himself ready. I don't know that he will start at the beginning of the year. As I mentioned, Travis Vokalek's probably going to get that starting job. If he's able to improve, if he's able to continue to develop, though, I can see him challenging that starting time as the season progresses. I can see maybe by game 5, 6, if he's continuing to develop, if he's continuing to show improvement, he has. There's a reason he's rated so high. There's a reason that he has so much hype surrounding him, and I'm sure he's eager to prove that. So the tight end group also has guys like Chris Hickman and Brewington to consider for that mix. They both have playing time at tight end, as I mentioned, but most of the time is as a blocking tight end. So I think that you're not going to have one guy replace Austin Allen in that regard, but you are going to have a room full of guys that are capable of being effective tight ends. So I think that the tight end group at least is gonna hold where it has been. At the best, I think that they're going to be utilized more effectively next season. So in that case, they're going to improve. I think that Austin Allen, as I mentioned, was underutilized. I don't think that we're going to make that mistake when we have success on the offense. So tight end room is going to improve next season. Now we're going to look at the running back room. So as mentioned, JUCO All-American Anthony Grant is looking like a favorite to start. He has the experience, the size, and the talents to be an every down back, which is what we've been looking for. He has the power to run guys over, but he also has the speed that might surprise some guys. So he's guaranteed, or he's not guaranteed a spot, but I'm putting my money that he's probably going to be that guy. The running back room, though, has a lot of competition in it as well. It's probably going to be the most intense competition behind maybe the secondary. So maybe the wide receiver. So it's in that top three in terms of how intense this competition is going to be this offseason. He's for sure a favorite to start there because of his size, because of his ability, because of his track record. So you look at other guys, though. So you have Marquise Stepp. He has the ability and the size to compare with Grant. He just wasn't able to break out of the depth chart last season. We didn't know exactly why we didn't see him a ton. We weren't sure if he didn't grab the playbook correctly, if he was having off the field issues. It didn't sound like any of that. It just sounded like he wasn't getting put in the game, and I don't know why. I assume that this offseason, the running backs are going to be put through more of an intense drilling process to see who can survive under pressure. Marquise Stepp, coming from JUCO himself, transfer himself, he's going to have that experience already. So I can see him being one to challenge. You have Jacques Wezziant, who struggled with the playbook and weight early on last season. Hopefully he's had time to learn it by now, which I wonder how much it's changing now that Whipple came in. But he looked dominant when he got going. He was a big guy. He didn't have top end speed, but he looked like a big guy. He didn't really have to have the agility. He just ran you over. He did outrun guys too, but he got winded. He was one where he could have had a touchdown, but he just got winded. But you have him, you have Gabe Ervin Jr. Before his season-ending injury, he looked like the future at running back as well. You have to wait and see if he's fully recovered from the injury. It sounded like it was a pretty severe knee injury that he went down with against Oklahoma, but he was powerful, quick, and shifty. So if he's able to make a full recovery, be able to get back to that level that he was at, I can certainly see him challenging for a spot as well. You do have Ramir Johnson still on the roster. He's played his heart out last season. He played, when he did go in, he ran hard and he gave it great effort every time he went in. Unfortunately, I just don't see how he starts. Maybe he gets play time, but he is 25 to 50 pounds lighter than any of those other options I mentioned. That size is a big difference, especially in the Big Ten as a running back. So I don't think that he is going to earn a starting spot when all these other options have all the same intangibles he has, but they're just a bigger frame. And that's just, I feel bad for him because, like I mentioned, this is the same thing with Smothers. They put a lot out on the field and they might not get rewarded for it this season. I don't think that we're going to see a rotating, running back room like we did last season. We're not going to have that running back by committee, which is why I don't think Ramir's going to get a ton of play time, outside of, I don't know, some certain packages he might run. But if I had to make a prediction now, it would probably be Grant and Yant at running back 1 and 2. Besides being fun to say, I think that those two guys, if Yant can get the playbook down and if he's able to play consistently, those two guys are going to be a hell of a punch at 1 and 2. Unless Ervin doesn't lose a step from the injury as well, then he might take that number 2 spot. I don't think he's going to supersede Anthony Grant. As I mentioned, Corn Craze mentioned that they were from the same high school, so it'd be cool to see those two guys start, at 1 and 2. But I actually think Ervin might be bigger than Anthony Grant. I just don't think he has the experience, as I mentioned. So if they're able to get in there, any one of those guys is going to be able to take a step up, especially if the offensive line is able to give them lanes to run through, especially if the receiving game is able to get going. That frees up the wide receivers or the running backs to have more space to run as well. So I think the running backs are going to take a step forward. Obviously, we didn't really lose anybody big. In fact, he brought some big guys in, Anthony Grant namely, but hopefully you get Gabe Ervin Jr. back. Jacques Wazient hopefully gets the playbook down. Marquis Stepp hopefully takes a step forward and emerges from the depth chart. So you have a lot of guys that are going to be vying for that starting spot. Not going to take a step back there. So I expect the running back room to take a step forward as well. Now we get to the linchpin of the entire team's success, in my opinion, the offensive line. So full disclosure, this is the entire reason why I wanted to do a breakdown of the position in the first place. I was only going to do the offensive line, but then it kind of spiderwebbed out. The offensive line impacts the run game, which impacts the passing game, which impacts the wide receivers and quarterbacks, which impacts how much the defense plays out on the field. So it kind of just affects everybody. It just shows you how much the team is connected. Every position is connected regardless. And it was fun to do a full team breakdown anyway, but in order to see where we might end up next season, we're going to have to look back at how bad we were last season. So out of 130 FBS teams, we ranked 126 in pass blocking grade. We ended the season with a 29.2 overall pass block grade out of 100. So, terrible. That's at the FBS level. That's at our level. If you even take a step down, if you include the smaller FCS schools, out of 295 Division I football programs, we ranked 282nd in pass block efficiency. So we ended the season with a 78.5 efficiency grade. The next closest Big Ten team for reference was Indiana at 242 with a grade of 83.7. Indiana ended the season at 2-10. Just goes to show you how much a bad offensive line directly impacts your record. If you're not able to block for the passing game, you're not able to have an offense. If you're not able to block for the running game, you're not able to have an offense. And if you're not able to have an offense, you're just sitting there. You're dead. So we actually allowed the 9th most pressures in Division I football. Nearly 2/3 of our pressures came from the offensive tackles as well. That would be Corcoran and Benhart. So your interior linemen, Nori Newili, Cam Jurgens, and Matt Sichterman, they averaged 65 average pass block grade. The tackles, however, Corcoran and Benhart, they averaged 15 average pass block grade. Corcoran himself had a 0. So the tackles were really what hurt you. The inside, did okay. They weren't outstanding, but they did okay. They held their own. The offensive line in general last season, with injuries and with just volatility, not knowing who to start, people not putting forth great effort, it was just a mess last season. And as I mentioned, 282nd out of 295 in Division I football at blocking the pass. That's got to change if we hope for Casey Thompson to have success, any of the wide receivers with Mickey Joseph to have success. That passing game directly impacts how well you're able to run the ball as well. So if we cannot improve the pass efficiency on the offensive line, we're in trouble. And I really, truly hope that we're able to play devil's advocate as I did last season. So as much crap as I laid on the offensive line and as much weight of our losses that I put on the offensive line last season, I also made sure to balance that out with the fact that they are still young. They were all really young and put into a position where they're not typically put when they don't have that much experience. Hail Varsity has a great article where they break down experience versus success. Amongst the offensive line that earned all conference honors, like all Big Ten, that's an all conference honor. So amongst offensive linemen that earned all conference honors, the average years of experience in the Power 5 over the past 5 seasons is 3.36 years of experience. The average in the Big Ten last season was 3.5 years of experience. Nebraska's starting line last season held an average of 2.6 years of experience. So we had nearly a year less of offensive line experience than those teams that had success and made those all-conference lists. If you even compare that to skill positions in the Power 5, which wide receivers, running backs, quarterbacks, those guys can have more success with less experience because it's more of an individual effort. Wide receiver, if you're fast, if you're athletic, running back, same thing. If you're quick, if you're athletic, look at Wisconsin's running back. Brand new kid, 17 years old. He has 1 year of experience. He went out there and just ran the world, led the world on fire. The skill positions can favor younger guys more. The average experience of guys earning all conference honors at skill positions over the past 5 seasons was 2.94 years. So even compared to skill positions, which can favor a younger group of guys, our offensive line was still young compared to that. So, we were still too experienced. Either way you dice it, the inexperience really showed up. Raiola is going to have his work cut out for him. Because of that inexperience, fundamentals and the discipline were super ugly last year. We had 27 of the 37 offensive penalties were on the offensive line last season. That's 8th in the Big Ten. How many drives can you look back on and think that died because of a false start or a holding call? And how many of those drives had multiple penalties on them? And you can see how that inexperience, how that discipline, lack of discipline really impacted the team. Luckily, it sounds like although Raiola has limited experience as a college coach, as a college position coach, he nails the fundamentals and mechanics on the offensive line. That seems like his two bread and butter things is fundamentals and mechanics. He teaches those two things. So hopefully the two things that we struggled with the most on the offensive line are the two things that we're able to really nail down this offseason. But to throw a wrench in that, you have Juergens and Matt Sichterman gone. Juergens' loss could possibly be the most crucial loss on the entire team. We have a ton of guys leaving, as I've mentioned in the past couple of videos, but Cam Juergens leaving puts us in a bad position in the fact that not only was he the only center that had substantial starting time, but that now throws every position on the offensive line into question. Now we not only need to identify who's going to start at all 5 of those starting jobs, but we also have to figure out which position to play each guy at. We have to find a guy to play center. We have to see if does that affect the left guard. Is he moving to center? Then who's going to play left guard? Yada, yada, yada. To address the inexperience and to help fill the voids that Juergens and Sichterman are leaving behind, we have targeted guys in the transfer portal. We couldn't wait for the incoming recruits to develop. We needed success now. As I mentioned previously in other videos, the 22 season is a make or break year for Scott Frost. He can't wait for guys to develop. He needs guys that can come in with experience and make an impact right away. The transfer of additions like Kevin Williams Jr. and Hunter Anthony will certainly help that along. Although I do suspect that we probably still have our hand in there trying to grasp some kind of big name to help that even further. Looking ahead at potential lineups, including those two guys, though, you have at center. So first and foremost, Raiola's going to need to find a center. He needs to start there and build the line around that because the center is the linchpin of the linchpin. So Frost has already mentioned a few names in the mix that have experience at center. Nori Nuili, Trent Hickson, and Ethan Piper all have experience there. I have a hunch that Nuili might actually shift over and take this center position over. You need a guy at center that's able to command the offensive line and read defenses as well. He seems to check both those boxes. He seems to be intelligent. He seems to have drive, and he seems to, have a good relationship with the offensive lineman he's been around. So if he moves over to center, then that kind of shakes up the guard position. So you have Kevin Williams Jr. could take that left guard position with Nuili moving to center. Turner Corcoran could move from that left tackle position into that right guard position. As I mentioned, Turner Corcoran really struggled with that left tackle position last season. He got that 0 pass block grade. So maybe on the inside is where he'll excel. He actually wasn't terrible at the run protection. So he might actually be intended to be an inside guy. He might be an interior lineman at heart, and he could take off next season and be a great guard. So that makes us look at tackles last. So if Teddy Prohaska is able to go in the fall, he'll likely start back at that left tackle position. He was only the second true freshman to start at left tackle in the history. Turner Corcoran was actually the first in 2020, but he played exceptionally well for a freshman. Hopefully he's able to recover from the injury. They never actually specified what his injury was. I seen kind of rumors that it was ACL and MCL, but either way, it was a very serious knee injury is what it was labeled as. So if he's able to make a full recovery, I expect him to start back at that left tackle because he was successful there, even being undersized. So if he adds size to that, he's only going to get better there. On the other side, I feel like Ezra Miller might be a sneaky right tackle pick for me. He only played in 3 games last year with no starts, but something tells me that with an extra year of experience and development, that's going to be good for him. There's really nothing else telling me that Ezra Miller's supposed to be on the field, but you have Hunter Anthony that could potentially take that right tackle position, but I for some reason want to say Ezra Miller's going to start right tackle. These are obviously all hypotheticals, heavily depending on player chemistry and development this offseason, but there's so many different configurations. I think that Teddy is pretty safe if he is healthy. He's a safe bet to start left tackle. Even just those other 4 slots, though, could go any which direction. So if Hickson would take center, that frees up Nuili, who could literally play any of those 3 interior positions. Williams and Anthony, as I mentioned, are flexible and they can play everything but center. Corcoran could flip and play right tackle if he needed to, or he could play any of those interior positions as well. Not to mention that there's the triple-double of Bs. Where do they fit in? You have Bryce Benhart, Brock Bando, and Brant Banks, BBBs, which is why I can never remember their first names. So they could go wherever as well, besides center. But all this is to say that no one, including the coaching staff, is really going to know anything for certain until fall camp. I think that we're not going to really have a solid starting line nailed down until fall camp. I'm not worried that they're not going to be able to find one. I'm not going to worry that they're not going to be able to figure out where to put guys. It's just a matter of chemistry. In my mind, the entire success of 2022 relies so heavily on the offensive line as it did last season that I'm most worried that they're not going to be able to accomplish that here. It's because nothing is certain. They could find a stud at every position, but if they're all, there's been so much movement, chemistry is not something that you can force. That's not something you can force to build or force to grow. It needs to be organic. And with so much movement on that offensive line, with so many new guys that haven't known each other before this year, I'm not sure that chemistry is going to be able to formulate as it needs to be successful next season. And, I hope that they're able to find some kind of chemistry. It sounds like Raiola is really forcing that through these guys. That's another thing that he drives is 5 guys seeing through one set of eyes, was something he kept saying in his press conference. He's even off the field. He's having them go eat pizza together, hang out together, play video games together, whatever it is, do it together. That way that chemistry can have more of a chance to connect. It's not something that's guaranteed. It's not something that's certain, but if they can nail this one position down, put my heart at ease there, I will drown myself in Kool-Aid. No problem there. So, offensive line as the defensive line could really go either way. I am worried that the offensive line could, I don't think it could probably get any worse next season. I don't think it could get worse. I just don't know if it's going to be able to take as much of a step forward as we need it to be successful. But, I'll say that they'll at least hold a standard from where they were, which was not great last year. So, all that overall, I think that the offense in general, every position is going to take a step forward, really, except for the offensive line might hold where it was or even slightly improve, which would still add a few wins to our record. So, finally, we've reached the end of the saga of starters. If you enjoyed the episode, please leave a like and comment letting me know what you think about it. I really did enjoy diving into the rosters of the different positions to see who might, fill out the vacancies that are left behind and what next year might shape up to look like. What position are you interested in seeing next year? Who is your surprise pick to grab a starting job? Do you think Nebraska can take a step forward next year, a big enough step to finally reach a bowl game? Let me know in the comments below. I want to thank everybody who actually watched all 3 parts of the video and stuck through it. There was a lot of them. There was a lot of talking. But everybody who has shown support this far, we've been having a lot of views on the videos and I've been gaining subscribers. So be sure to share the video if you liked it with your friends. Make sure to like it, subscribe, and I will see you next time. Go Big Red.